Hello, I'm Michael Hammer, and I'd like to explore with you today the concepts of business process and process organization. Now, process is a very small, unassuming, familiar word, yet the idea of business process is the most important concept in business operations today. Why? Because process gives us the solution to the longest running mystery in the world of business. And that is, why is it so darn hard to make our businesses perform better? We've tried everything. We've tried automation, and we've tried training, and we've tried cultural change, and we've tried leadership, and we've tried every darn thing under the sun, and it doesn't help. We're still slow. We're still costly, we still make too many mistakes, and we still make life too complicated for the customer. Processes are going to help us solve that problem. Now, when pressed for a definition, people will tell me that a process is how work gets done or the way we do things. I think we need to be a little more precise. I would suggest we define process as a group of related business activities that together create value for a customer. Now, there are no fancy words in there, but there are a number of very important ones. First of all, a process is a group of activities. It's not just one. And they're related. And they have to work together, and the whole point is value for the customer. Process is a customer-driven idea. We do processes not for ourselves, not because we want to, but because the customer needs the results, needs the value that the processes are creating. Let me give you a couple examples of business processes. One is order fulfillment, or if you like, filling an order. Now, there are a lot of different steps involved in filling an order. You have to put the order into your computer system, maybe check credit, allocate inventory, pick it off the shelf, pack it in a box, do some traffic planning, figure out how you're going to ship it, and then put it in the truck and send it on its way. That's a process. What's the result of that process? What's the value for the customer? Pretty easy. Delivered goods. Now, which of those steps, all by itself, creates the result for the customer? The answer? None of them. Now, you might say that shipping creates the result for the customer, but not on its own. Because you can't ship until you've packed, and you can't pack until you've picked, and you can't pick until you've handled the order in the first place. That's the point of process. It's no one thing, it's all of them. Process is not about means, it's about ends. It's not about how we do individual pieces, it's about how we get the whole thing done. It's about customers. It's about the results that we're creating for them. Let me give you another example. New product development. Developing a product. Now, that's not the same as research and development, usually known as R&D. Most of you will have R&D in your companies, and that's not the same as product development. Why not? Because remember, product development is a group of activities. It's a process. It involves understanding the customer, coming up with an initial design, doing a prototype, field testing it, doing some costing, coming up with a pilot plant. That's what's involved in product development. R&D, on the other hand, isn't a group of activities. It's a group of people. It's an organization. It's your scientific and engineering and technical personnel. Now, are your R&D people involved in your product development process? I hope so. Otherwise, you're going to have some very peculiar products. But are they the only people involved in product development? Certainly not. If you think about that list of activities involved in product development, sure, you have R&D people. But you also have finance people, and manufacturing people, and sales people, and marketing people. Lots of different people with lots of different skills doing different activities, but brought together to achieve a process. That's what processes are about. Bringing different things together to get the result for the customer. Processes are the heart of our business. They're all that customers care about. Customers don't care about our strategy, our organizational structure, our succession plans. Customers want one thing and one thing only: results, value. And what gives it to them? Processes. Processes are the core of our business. So you might say to me, okay, processes are important, but why do we have to talk about them? And the answer is because in almost every company around today, the business processes are in terrible shape. They're in dreadful condition. How so? Well, for instance, let's look at order fulfillment and see how it's typically done in a company today. One person, usually in sales administration or customer service, gets the order and puts it into the computer system. Someone else in the finance department does the credit check. A third person in production control does the inventory allocation. Someone else in the warehouse does the picking and packing. And then finally, someone else in the logistics organization does traffic planning. In other words, the process is done by different people, each of whom is focused on a separate individual task, and each of whom is located in a different part of the company, in a different organization. Well, you might say, what's the matter with that? Sounds like a good way to do things. Someone who knows customer service takes care of getting the orders. Someone who knows how to pick and pack does picking and packing. Sounds like a great idea. Specialization of labor, building on expertise. Well, it used to be a great idea 200 years ago during the Industrial Revolution, but today it's killing us. And it's the cause of all the business problems that we started talking about earlier. And the reason is this: because that way of doing work fragments our process. The order fulfillment process is broken into pieces which are scattered all over the organization. One piece here, one piece there, one piece somewhere else. And what that leads to is what's called non-value adding work. There are different kinds of work. Value adding work is work that matters to the customer. The customer is willing to pay for it. It's work that directly contributes to the creation of the result that the customer is waiting for at the end of the day. Most of the things we've been talking about are value-adding work. Getting the order, picking and packing, traffic planning, all that is helping to directly produce the result the customer is waiting for. Then there's waste. Waste is unnecessary work. Mistakes, errors, putting things in the wrong box and then you have to take it out and put it in the right box. And then there's non-value adding work. And that's the worst one today. Non-value adding work is necessary work that the customer won't pay us for. It's work that we have to do in order to perform the value adding work. It's overhead. It's administration. It's checking and communicating and auditing and supervising. It's all the glue that holds together the individual pieces of real work. And when you fragment the process, you multiply non-value adding work. When I'm here and you're there, then we need checkers and checkers on checkers and communicators and liaisons and expediters and supervisors. And you know what all that extra work does? It adds cost. It slows things down. It makes the whole system complex and impossible to change for the customer. And it generates errors. It's the source of the performance problems we have today. Today's business performance problems: slow speeds, high costs, high error rates, inflexibility, are problems that result from the fragmentation of process across our organizational structure. They are problems caused by the multiplication of non-value adding work when the pieces of real work are scattered all over. And why are our processes so fragmented? Because we have built functional organizations. Functional organizations based on functional departments which specialize in individual areas of activity. We have the customer service department that does one thing. And we have the warehouse that does one kind of thing. And we have shipping that does another thing. And the trouble is that our processes cross our functions. And when that happens, the processes are invisible. They're unmanaged. They're lost. And they drown in non-value adding work. When people talk about functional organizations, they often call them silos or smokestacks or stovepipes. I have a different metaphor I like to use. I call them castles. Think of them as medieval fiefdoms. Castles on a hill surrounded by moats and high walls. And at the top of every castle, there's a catapult. And how does work get done? Well, we toil away in the basement of our castle. And when we finish our work, we take it upstairs, and we wind that catapult up, and we toss our work over the wall to the clowns of the next castle. And after that, we are done. Because all we care about is our work. What we don't care about is anything else. We don't care about the other castles. We don't care about the customer. And we sure don't care about the process. In fact, we don't have a clue as to the process. All we know is our bit. And when everyone is focusing on his or her bit, the whole goes to hell. We used to believe that if everybody takes care of the pieces, the whole will take care of itself. Nothing could be further from the truth. Processes are in deep trouble in functional organizations. What perpetuates that kind of castle mentality? It's simple. First of all, there's a sense of organizational identification and affiliation. It's who you think you are and where you think you work. If I ask what do you do, you'll tell me that you do finance work or you do warehouse work. You don't think about the business, the customer, or a larger context. You don't think about the big picture. Why? Because of a lack of awareness. Nobody's told you about it. You've been told to stick to your knitting and to do one thing, and nobody's explained to you the process, who else is involved, or how your work affects them, the process, and the ultimate customer. And the measurement and reward systems reinforce that attitude. Everybody's measured on the work of the castle. Nobody's measured on results, customers, or process. For example, I visited a major manufacturing company, and they told me a story about a sales rep who brought in an order from a new customer. It was a small order, but the customer said, if you fill it fast, there'll be a lot of business to follow. So the sales rep wrote it up. Do it fast. Now, 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 now. And it entered the universal order fulfillment process. And it started getting lobbed between castles by catapults. Eventually, it comes to the shipping castle. The guy there looks at it and said, uh-oh, this is a dreaded less than truckload order. If I send it fast, what will happen to shipping costs? They'll go up. How am I measured? On shipping costs. Let's see here. Will the sales rep be by to share some of his juicy commission with me? I think not. It'll go by boat. Now, was this guy being a bad guy? Was he being not a team player? No, he was being smart. He was being logical. He was doing what the system expected him to do, which is focus on his castle and ignore everything else. In fact, if he got a little more enterprising and decided to poke his head over the wall and look at the larger context and say to himself, well, maybe to help the customer and improve the company in this case, I shouldn't worry about shipping costs, but I should really get it done fast, what would happen to that guy poking his head over the castle wall? That's right, you know it. His head would get shot off. That's what would happen. I discovered this recently. I was cleaning out the basement and I found a toy from one of my kids was little. And it was a large plastic box with a wind-up key on the side and a number of lids on top. And when the kid winds it up, a Sesame Street character pokes its head out through one of the lids, and the kid has to take a mallet and bang the head down. And then another head pokes itself up, and the kid has to bang that one down. I used to think this was for developing hand-eye coordination. It turns out it's an executive development tool used in all the best business schools. Be quiet, sit down, shut up, who asked you? Everybody's narrowly focused. In fact, I have a little Rorschach test for you to help you determine if you're living in a functional organization. I'm going to tell you the acronyms of some of the most commonly heard phrases in a functional organization. And you can test yourself. INMJ. That's right, I knew you'd get it. It's not my job. Everybody is focused on a little bit. Oh, the customer didn't get his order. Not my job. Customer's unhappy. Not my job. We lost the account. Not my job. We're out of business. I ain't got a job. Next one. IDWIT. That's right. I do what I'm told. Obedience absolves responsibility. Hey, we're in trouble. It's not my fault. I followed orders. And finally, IDMB. I did my best. Actually, it should be phrased as follows. I did my best. A little whine in there. In other words, I don't have any responsibility. I don't have any accountability. It's not my fault. It's not my job. I did my part. That's why we're in trouble. We're in deep trouble in performance because our processes are fragmented, because nobody has accountability for them, nobody cares about them, they're not measured, they're not managed, they're invisible, and they're full of non-value-adding work. Other than that, they're doing great. Now you might say to me, is this a new phenomenon? Has this just happened? Have our processes suddenly, overnight, gotten into trouble? The answer is no. Our processes are terrible today, and they've been terrible for a long time. Up until now, it didn't matter too much. Because the world economy has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. And you could put it in a lot of different ways. I'll say it as follows. We have become a customer-dominated economy. Once upon a time, there were more customers than there were suppliers. There were more of them than there were of us. Customers didn't know too much, they didn't have too much choice, and there was a shortage of stuff for them to buy. So therefore, we didn't have to worry that much about customers. We could do things efficiently for us and not worry if it was being done fast or flexibly or accurately. We could optimize internally and not worry about the customer. That's over. Every industry I know today faces smart, tough customers, global competition, overcapacity, constant change. In that kind of environment, if you operate in the old ways, you're sunk. You can't be high cost. You've got to be low cost. You can't be slow. You've got to be fast. And the ways we've operated in the past simply don't make it anymore. We've got to do something to get our processes in better shape. What does that take? What it takes is for us to put our processes center stage. In the past, remember, processes are lost. They're orphaned. They're invisible. What we have to do is make people aware of processes so that they do process work. What does process work mean? It means that an individual doing his or her job is doing it with an awareness of the customer for whom the work's being done, the result, the value that's being produced, and all the other pieces that are part of the process. A phrase I like to use is people have to do task, but think process. Let me give you an example from a dog food company, a basic manufacturing business if there ever was one. Now, this company was experiencing some problems, so they decided to focus on their processes. What does that mean? If in the old days, you had visited this manufacturing company and gone to the manufacturing floor and asked one of the workers there what he did, he would have said, I operate this extruder. And let me tell you, you don't want to know any more than that. I've been there, it's ugly. Now, if that's his mentality, let's suppose some extrusion ends on the floor, and my advice here, do not go for the mental image. What's his attitude? Not my job. My job's to run the machine. Not my job to worry about the floor. That's the janitor's job. Or let the dog pick it up if the dog wants to eat it. Not my job, not my problem. Let's suppose he hits his quote at 3 o'clock. What's he going to do? Well, either check out and go home or go out for a smoke. Because from his point of view, he is done. Now if you visit this company and you ask the guy on the manufacturing floor, what do? He says, I'm part of the production phase of the order fulfillment process. Now you might say to me, big deal, jargon, cliches. It makes a real difference. Because now he's aware of what he's doing, and more importantly, why he's doing it. He understands the goal, the outcome, the customer, and everybody else involved. So now let's suppose some extrusion ends on the floor. What's he going to do? He's going to pick it up. And he's going to make sure it doesn't happen again. Why? Because he's suddenly become a disciple of St. Francis of Assisi and is overwhelmed with concern with the hygienic needs of our four-legged friends? No. Because he understands the point. The point is not to run the extruder. The point is to fill orders. And if it's on the floor, we can't ship it. And if we can't ship it, we're not filling the order. If we're not filling the order, we're not doing our job. His perspective on what he does has shifted. Let's suppose he finishes quota at 3 o'clock. What's he going to do? Knock off? He's either going to make some more, or they're going to go down to the shipping dock and fold boxes and help other people. Why? Because he's become an altruist and decided to devote his life to self-abnegation in service of others? No. Because he recognizes it is his job. His job is not the machine. His job is to help contribute to the performance of the process. And if that means making more, that's fine. If it means folding boxes, that's fine too. It is a transformation of people in the organization and consequently the organization as a whole. I sometimes call this an Escher shift. You may have heard of the Dutch artist Mauritius Escher. He did these optical illusion kinds of things. You might be looking at one of his paintings and first you see white birds on a black background, then you look at it again, you see black birds on a white background. In art, this is called figure ground reversal. Well, we've got the same thing going on here. For the last 200 years, since the advent of the Industrial Revolution, we've been focusing on tasks. We've been beating the hell out of the tasks to make them efficient, perform well. We train people and we specialize them in tasks. Tasks are front and center. Way off in the distance is process. What do we have to do? Reverse them. Process has to be front and center. You have to be aware of the process because without it, we have the problems we've talked about. Let me give you another illustration of process and how it's paid off at a major telephone company. Now, we're talking here about a service process. If your phone breaks, what are you going to do? Well, what you have to do is call up and report it to a customer service person. Now, which strikes me as kind of a metaphysical problem. Your phone is broken, yet you have to call up. Well, never mind. So how did it work in the old days? You would call up, talk to a customer service person who would take the information and could do nothing else. Because that person's job was to take the information and that's it. And it would be handed off to a line tester, a technical person who would sit in front of a computer screen and check to see if the problem was in the central office switch or in the trunk lines. If so, it could be fixed there. Otherwise, hand it off again to a dispatcher who would then find a service technician who was available and send that person to your premises to fix your equipment. And when that person got there, his or her job was to fix the equipment and get out of there. That's the way it used to work. Why was it done this way? Efficiency. Everybody was real efficient at his or her own activity. This led to some peculiar approaches, however. For example, the customer service person. What was that person measured on? Number of calls per day. What kind of behavior did that induce? You know. Hello, I don't know, goodbye. Hello, I don't know, goodbye. Task efficiency does not lead to good performance of the process. Who was ignored in the old days at this phone company? That's right, the customer. Because what does the customer want? The customer wants the problem solved now. Not eventually. Now. On the first call that he's making. And you tell me, in what percentage of the cases could the problem be fixed on the first call in the old days? Essentially none. What have they done? They focused on process. Now they have one person who does the whole thing from beginning to end, called a customer care advocate, who talks to you when you call up, captures the information, does the computer work, and if necessary, dispatches a field service technician. One person, not fragmented activities. And the service tech has changed as well. It used to be that person was dispatched to the next job. Now, every customer has a dedicated service technician. I serve as a technician certain customers, and if you've got a problem, I'm going to be the one you see. And my job is not just to fix your broken equipment. It's to do preventative maintenance so it doesn't break in the first place. And since I really am getting to know you, my goal is to help you do a better job in your business, and maybe I can offer you new products and services as well. In other words, the whole perspective has changed from a narrow task focus to a big picture customer focus, from an activity focus to an outcome focus. It's not do your job, but get the result that we all need. It's not please your boss, it's satisfy the customer, because the customer is the one who counts. Let me give you another example. At a manufacturer that makes fairly complex products. Now, it would frequently happen that a customer would call up and say, well, I'm ordering this big complex product you make. I need you to modify it to meet my particular needs. And the customer service person would take that information and go to the product designer and say, we need you to modify the design for this product. What would the product designer say? Of course, can't be done. What does he mean? I don't want to bother. Why? Not my job. My job is to design new products. That's what I've been trained to do. That's what I've been told to do. That's what I'm measured and rewarded for. If you make me take time off from developing a new product to satisfy this customer, I'm going to be in trouble. So the customer service rep would beat them up, and they'd finally work out a compromise. They'd go to the industrial engineer, and they would say, okay, we need you to modify the production system so we can make this modification of the product. The industrial engineer, of course, says can't be done. What does he mean? Don't want to bother. Same reasons. So they jump on him, and finally they beat him into submission, and they go to the scheduler. And they say, okay, we need a slot to make this modified version. The scheduler says, sorry, all full for the next century. What does it mean? Too much trouble, too much bother. It's not what I'm supposed to be doing. These are typical problems in a functional castle organization. So what did this company do? They recognized that all these people ought not to view themselves in separate parts of the company, but needed to recognize that they were all part of the same process, that they were all part of the same team. And they've put them together into a process team they call the order management process. And they have a shared responsibility. That responsibility is to get that order from the customer and come up with a specification of what we're going to make, a plan of how we're going to make it, and a date on which it's going to get made. And who has responsibility for that? All of them together. Not one of them. There's no separation of responsibility. It's joint and collective. That's what makes them a team. What is a team? It's a very overused term today. A team is not a group of people who know each other, who like each other, who wear the same attractive uniforms. That's not a team. A team is a group of people with a common goal. And that goal comes from the process of which they are all a part. The results for this company have been practically unbelievable. The time it takes to get orders done has gone down by 75 to 80%. Inventory turns have gone up by 150%. And the sales in the operation have gone up 50% without any increase in capital equipment. In other words, by focusing on process, by getting people to understand process, to think process, you drive out all the overhead and the non-value-adding work, and you get work done faster and cheaper and better and more flexibly, and that's what we need today. Indeed, these are the benefits of process work. Process work is less burdened with non-value-adding work. Process work has people aligned to a common goal, and process work is deliberate and repeatable. That's the way we succeed today, by doing not task work, but process work. Let me remind you that this process stuff is not just terminology. It's not just new words. It's a new way of thinking about the business. It's thinking about the business in the same way that a customer would, in terms of outcomes, results, and value. It's taking a big picture rather than a little picture approach to what it is that everybody is doing. So now we've seen some examples of what processes are and what process work is like. And I hope you can see how process work really delivers great benefits to customers and to the organization. Lower cost, faster speed, much better performance. It's through focusing on processes that we can cut our way through traditional castle organizations and deliver the performance that modern competitive business requires. But that's not where it ends. I often describe process as a bobsled run. Because when you jump on a bobsled, you go back and forth a couple times, and then you're off. And let me tell you, from there it's fast, it's a little scary, and you can't go back. And that's what happens when you jump on the process bobsled too. Because this very simple little shift of thinking about process instead of about task changes everything. It would take days for us to go through all that in detail. But I invite you just to think about the examples we've talked about and think about what they might mean in several areas. First, people's jobs. Think about at the phone company, for example. What happened to people's jobs? In the old days, people's jobs were very narrow and specialized. Now they're much broader. Instead of doing one thing, I have to do a lot of things. In the old days, I followed orders. Now, I have accountability. I have responsibility. I have ownership of the results. And consequently, jobs are much more rewarding. In the old days, I had a limited job. Now, I have lots of opportunity, a much broader, expanded environment. The same thing has happened at the manufacturers that we discussed. In the old days, people focused on one thing. Now their responsibilities are much broader. But broader jobs means much broader skills. Everybody in the organization has to have broader capabilities. That doesn't mean we all become generalists. You still have a primary area where you have in-depth expertise, but it can't be limited to that anymore. Everybody has to understand the process. Everybody has to understand the work of the other people in the process. Everybody has to understand the customer and the business of which we're part. You need new behaviors on people's parts. People have to be responsible. They have to be willing to go the extra mile. They have to feel accountable. They have to be self-starting because there's nobody looking over their shoulder. In fact, the whole idea of management changes in this environment. In a castle organization, functional departmental managers are the kings and queens of the castles. They give the orders that everybody else follows. Now, if I'm working in a process team, it's me and my teammates who have to understand what needs to be done and make the decisions about it because we're the ones closest to the action. We're the ones who know the best. In fact, the whole way the organization is put together changes. We don't have these high-walled castles anymore. We've knocked down those castle walls. We're focused sideways instead of vertically. We're focused out toward the customer, not up toward the boss. The lines between organizations stop meaning very much when we're all working together to a common end. In fact, the attitudes, the whole culture of the organization changes phenomenally as well. In a castle environment, it's, I'm number one, to hell with everybody else. Now, we're all on the same side. If we don't get that order done, I can't blame you. You can't blame me. We all sink together. We all have responsibility. I don't look at you as an enemy or a competitor. You're an ally. You're a teammate. You're a resource. In the old days, if a problem lands on my desk, what do I do with it? I try to dump it on some other clown. I don't want to hold it when the music stops. In a process environment, I solve it. Because if it doesn't get solved, the process isn't done, the customer doesn't get his result, and I'm going to feel the consequences. When people are doing process work, their mottos change as well. It's no longer INMJ, it's not my job. It becomes IIOP, which I'm sure you will recognize stands for it is our process. And of course, the most interesting word there is our, shared responsibility. Instead of I do what I'm told, it's TCPAOS. Huh? You should know what C is. Customer. It stands for the customer pays all our salaries. Doesn't matter what the boss says, the customer is the real arbiter. And finally, in homage to Harry Truman, it's no longer IDMB, I did my best. Instead, it's TBSH, the buck stops here. Your best doesn't count. Your best isn't good enough. The only thing that counts is whether you get it done, because you've got accountability and you've got responsibility. It's a fundamental shift, a very simple idea which changes everything. Now you might say, gee, I don't know if I want to do it if it involves so much change. Let me say, you don't have a choice. Today's competitive market requires that we drive out costs, we become more flexible, we drive out errors, and that we operate at speeds that we never thought possible in the past. We won't get there from here by tinkering around the edges of our castle organizations. We got to blow those castles up and focus crosswise on our customer-focused, customer value-creating processes. The companies who don't do that don't have a chance. Which means we all have to become process organizations. What's that? It's very simple. It's an organization that supports process work. It's an organization in which everyone understands the processes, the customers, and how his or her work contributes to both of them. Traditional organizations are process hostile. They don't create environments that support process work. People don't understand the big picture. They aren't incented. They aren't measured. Processes are invisible. We have to create process organizations. We have no choice. It is inevitable. And if you think you just as soon not, let me assure you, your competitors already are. And by so doing, they're creating a standard of performance that there's no way to achieve without focusing on your processes. The 21st century belongs to the process organization. The time to start is today. Thank you very much for your attention.